So today we are continuing on with the swirls, but I want to answer a question right off the bat regarding my swirls. A lot of very observant sudsers have noticed that I tend to, when I do swirl, I swirl with 5 colors. And they asked why. They've asked why a whole bunch of times. And the answer to that is I have no idea. I just really like using 5 colors for swirls. So yeah, we're doing another 5 color swirl today. Actually, it's 5 accents plus a base, so it's 6. So everything that I just said is completely irrelevant, but I'm not going to bother cutting it out because that's my intro, and I will tell you more about this 6 color swirl in just a minute. But before I do, hello, I am Mrs. Soap and Clay. Let's make stuff. How's it going, sudsers? Welcome back to the channel. You are at Soap and Clay, where we make all the soapy things, and you are here for week 32 of year 3, and yeah, we're doing some swirls this week. Now this particular bar, as I said, 6 color swirl, but we're doing it with a salt soap. Now, anybody who's ever made a salt soap knows that it can be kind of difficult to work with if you're wanting to do very beautiful designs because it does tend to thicken very, very quickly. So we're going to talk about what I do with my soap batter, to make sure that it stays fluid for a beautiful pour and get all of the beautiful swirls. But we're also going to talk about how quickly you should unmold and cut and stamp a solid salt scrub salt soap bar to ensure that you're able to do all of those things. So let's get to the video and we can do all of that there. Okay, so a 6 color salt bar, and I am going to be putting amla powder into my soap batter, into my oils, instead of kaolin with this particular recipe because I have noticed that a lot of people really enjoy using salt brine soaps, salt soaps on their hair these days. And so this particular recipe is specially formulated for just in case you're going to be putting it on your hair. So a higher super fat as well as the soap nuts to help with the lather, but the amla powder is going to be good for the hair as well as, detoxifying the scalp and all of the jazz. And so that's what you saw go into it, before we put in the soap nuts. Now, the water itself, it is a double whammy. It does have a salt within the water, creating a salt brine, as well as the soap nuts, again, to help out with the bubble, because while salt bars are great, they have such a beautiful, mild, creamy, gentle lather, I do still like the big bubble payoff. And so I like to incorporate the soap nuts in this as well and, make sure that we have a really nice bubble in all water conditions. Now, with this particular recipe, because the salt is in the batter itself, so the salt brine, and I will be adding more salt for more of the look and also a light exfoliation, although it tends to go away, the salt itself, if you're using a fine Himalayan, which I am, once, saponification is complete. I did want to make sure, I always make sure within these, recipes, within these particular batches, that I am working incredibly quickly because the salt within all of this is going to thicken up this soap batter very fast. It's also going to thicken up, it's going to harden up, rather, the finished soaps. And I have had situations wherein I have forgotten that the thing that is in my column molds is a whole bunch of salt bars, and I've just let it sit for a couple days. And this is literally what you're going to see today, and kind of the consequences of doing that. The soap itself, just for a spoiler, is still completely fine, but the finished product, being able to cut it, gets really, really tricky because it can get too crumbly, and it can also get, really impossible to get a stamp into. I have had, interestingly, success with putting a soap onto like a heat plate or putting a heating pad over the soaps, warming them up for around 30 minutes or so, and then stamping, and it does soften up enough to get a stamp into it. But honestly, for the most part, it's more trouble than it's worth. I'm going to show you just how true that is after we're done with the pour. But right now in the prep phase, we have worked in all of the colorants. We have the amla powder in nicely. We are now putting in the sea salt into just the white portion. And now let's go on to the pour and see just how quick I need to work. Okay, now on to the pour. Now I'm going to be doing all 5 colors into the main container at the same time. So going from essentially, 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, pouring 2 colors. I'm then going to flip the big container and pour it at essentially noon and 6. And then the rest of the 5th colors goes directly into the middle. Now this is creating a really nice swirl in the soap batter, even though the batter itself is getting overly thick. So I don't have to take a skewer to any of this. I don't have to, worry about a hanger or anything, because essentially an in the pot swirl is doing all of that work for me, which I very much love. Now, there is a bit of a, method to my madness in this, in the reason that I put it in the way that I do. And it really does have to do with how the batter is moving as you're putting in this 5th and final color within the middle. Now for the pouring, again, it's going to be just as fast as I possibly can into the molds and get them over and, ready to start doing its sponification thing. I use PVC pipe for my columns. I highly recommend that. Go to your local, home improvement store. They will cut it to whatever size you want. Those little caps exist too. And then after that, you're just going to, after it's saponified, you're just going to take these exact molds with the soap in them, put them in your freezer for around 30 minutes to an hour, take them out. The heat transfer, the change in the temperature is going to allow those soaps to slide out really beautiful. Let's go check out this cut. Okay, now onto the cut, and as you can see, it's already cut. I forgot that I had filmed this and I wanted to show you a cut. So I let these sit for too long. They sit for about 2 days within the molds themselves before I remembered that, again, they're soap bars, and a couple more days after that before I finally cut them. And you can see the roughness on them. You can see the edges getting a little bit crumbly. It was definitely kind of scary to cut these because I have had circumstances within a salt brine, because of the copious amounts of salt and the crumbly nature as it starts to, cure, it getting very, very crumbly and things just breaking away. So do pay attention to that when you are working with a salt brine, soap. If you are unfamiliar with this, if you have not worked with a salt brine within a soap before, I really do recommend going very, very light on your salts and then working up to a label that, or an area that you feel is comfortable for you, to ensure that you're still going to get a nice smooth soap without it causing issues as far as timing and stamping and all the things. But to this, I was able to cut this even though it had been poured, 5 days later. But let's talk about, first let's talk about the bars. They're gorgeous. That's delightful. So just pouring straight down into the mold, you get some very interesting color variations within all of the soaps. You get a lot of really beautiful swirls. It's kind of like concentric circles going out from the middle. It's very lovely. I like it 100%. Some of these bars I've poured, because I've done so many of these salt bars over the years, for A Drop in the Ocean. It's one of her staples for sure, but also for my own line, there were some that it ends up looking like the world if you really adjust those colors, like these exact colors that I used, and you use essentially more of them than you would the white. You can get things that look like earth in the middle of the soaps. I think I posted a picture on Instagram the last time that happened, so go check that out. But for the stamping itself, within all of that, I'm going to show you just how ineffective that is. This was just a waste of my time to try to stamp these at this point, because I had let them go for too long. So if you are wanting to stamp your salt bars, you really do need to get them out of the mold within 24 hours and cut and stamped and set off to cure. Otherwise, you're going to be dealing with this. Now, it's not anything to worry about. This isn't an indication that there's anything wrong with the soap. There's not. It's just the nature of the game when you are working with salts. And unfortunately, that's kind of what you're dealing with in most cases with salt bars. You can increase the water content pretty significantly, like maybe pour your water content at 3 times. so your liquid at 3 times, assuming that you aren't going overpowering with the salt that you're putting into the water, of course, and allow yourself a little bit more working time after it's saponified so you can cut and stamp. But you should always expect when you are working with a salt bar that this is a potential. Now, the finished product, the payoff, it's worth it, because it's such a lovely batch of soap when you're working with a salt bar, when you're using a salt brine bar. It's lovely for the skin. It feels great. This beautiful, big, creamy lather, stunning, but you definitely do need to cut it and, well, you need to pour it and you need to cut it all very fast because salt can be difficult to work with. But there it is, some salt scrub bars with a very easy 6-color pour. And there it is, a gorgeous salt scrub bar. And yeah, first up, I always soap it to almost an emulsion to make sure that I have plenty of time to get all of my colors dialed in because it's a lot of colors. Second, while there is salt in the actual, soap batter itself within the lye solution, I do put that salt in and of itself, the real salt, into the batch right before I'm ready to pour. Third, I really have had the best luck using an in the mold swirl, just dropping everything in all at the same time basically and pouring it in as quickly as possible so you don't end up with essentially just colors stacked on top of each other instead of swirled. But to the actual salt bars themselves, yeah, I let those go for too long. I let them sit in their mold for about 2 days, and then I didn't bother cutting them for probably 2 or 3 days after that. And as a result, I was completely unable to get my acrylic stamps into them. They were not going to be easy to bevel, to really clean up. So definitely do keep that in mind when you are making your salt soaps. I would say within 36 hours, have them out of their molds and stamped and starting to cure. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get your beautiful stamp in. So that's that. Yes, I hope you guys had fun today. I always have fun when I get to make things with swirls, and I realize that I haven't been doing a lot of that. So thank you really for humoring me and allowing me to do so. Sudsers, thank you for existing and allowing me to be me. I appreciate you guys more than you will ever know. You guys are epic and awesome and all of the things, and I am out of here. But I will see you guys all again tomorrow for another round of soapy fun. Bye.